So how do you interpret risk at Rabobank in the context of sort of the wine industry?
Interpreting risk, that's always a complex question, but I mean, what we're looking for is what's going to disrupt the client's ability to ultimately pay down loans, right? And thinking about this from a financial perspective, and as we kind of touched on this idea of risk, the risk from climate change, for a long time was probably a bit more theoretical. It's become something that we're much more conscientious of. Think of things like the ability to, access to water, that sort of thing is particularly an important strategic concern, and certainly within the wine industry, it's become an issue of concern. Something that we would look at in terms of does the client have adequate access and secured rights to water and so forth.
Okay, and when you're asking these kinds of questions, how do you do your risk analysis, your due diligence? Because I mean, you're talking about global.
Yeah, look, I mean, these are always local decisions. It's just something that gets factored into the decision when we look at an application. We're looking at how is this is just something that we figure into the ultimate decision on whether or not to make a loan. Is this is one consideration that we would include in that.
Yeah. Okay. I was just interested in the sorts of climate change, for example. What are the long-term factors you would take into consideration?
Yeah, I mean, it's the big one. I think especially when we think about clients in the wine space, the big thing that I would say we look at is access to water rights. How secure is water? And that sort of, is it, are these long-term rights? Are they in an aquifer that's at risk? Those sorts of things.
So water is one of the key.
It's a key one that we would look at. Yeah. Yeah.
What is the state of innovation in this space at the moment? Because you mentioned innovation.
Yeah. Oh, there's an awful lot. It's really exciting when you look at the innovation that's happening out there. There's an awful lot of ideas that are starting to bubble up. There's a lot of appetite for new ideas. I think there's certainly a recognition that we need to find new ways of doing things. We need to find ways to improve efficiency on the one hand, and then on the other hand, there are an awful lot. Just the rise. Think of how much progress has been made in terms of our ability to use artificial intelligence, to use technology, the new ways that we're figuring out to use technology and so forth. So, we have this platform that I was talking about in my presentation called Food Bites, where we invite in a number of small startup companies or companies that are still in early stages, and sometimes just in the idea stage, and we'll invite them in to pitch for financing. And you just see so many creative ideas, and there are a myriad of new companies coming into this space with great new ideas on kind of farming techniques, or new ways to use robotics or tech and to improve farming and make it more kind of less require less inputs or become more productive, that sort of thing.
Really funding innovation.
Well, we're not even necessarily funding it. What we're doing is we're bringing in companies to pitch to private equity or larger strategic companies in the space or investors, and it's really just an opportunity for them to pitch their ideas and the ideas that seem to fit, because there's a lot of this stuff that like any kind of innovation, there's a lot of things that maybe won't work or we're not ready for yet, or people are not quite ready to invest in yet. But there's a couple of things that come out of that. One is it's a great place to exchange ideas and cross-fertilization of ideas. And then it's also a great opportunity. One of the things that we bring to these companies is just an opportunity to kind of give them a little bit of mentoring on how to pitch to investors, right? And that's one of the things that they often value the most. And we would like to invest more, but it is kind of a risky space. But there are, with any kind of innovation and new ideas, there's risk involved. But it's
to help those come to fruition and
And there's, and there are companies that have come out of this that are starting to partner with large strategic companies and looking for innovative solutions to the problems that they have, and they're coming up with some really interesting things. There's, the kind of the sister innovation to the sister platform to Food Bites that I mentioned, where we bring in companies and allow them to pitch. Kind of the sister to that is called Terra, and that's where we actually bring together a large company that has a specific problem that is looking for innovative solutions, and we partner them with some of these small innovative companies, and we bring them together. But it's just been so fascinating to watch this whole space develop. Across the spectrum of different kinds of companies that have come in, whether it's to reduce food waste by making, helping corporate chefs make better decisions, helping to extend the shelf life, finding, new ways to extend the shelf life of fresh produce. Such a big part of what the challenge that we have is how much food gets wasted. How do we reduce waste and all of that? I think they say something like 50% of food that gets produced is wasted, right? So it's an enormous percentage, right? So how do we, if we can reduce that waste, that it makes a huge impact on our carbon footprint. But then the other things around, how do you use this example of the company that's using artificial intelligence and DNA sequencing to understand soil types, right? I mean, it's just stuff that, it's way geekier than I could ever get into, but it was, sitting down with them and having the conversation, it was fascinating. And the way that they can take that then and even map out how those different microbes, the differences in microbes in the soil, will affect the flavor of the wine. And so what what flavor profiles are you looking for? And that, at the end of the day, this is the essence of terroir, right?
Do you have specific examples in the wine industry, from your own experience, in terms of innovation, things that are happening at the moment? You probably can't cite specific clients or anything.
Well, I mean, there's, the example that I cited in the presentation, which I think is a great example, and Jackson Family Wines is a really good example. Obviously, Torres and Sograp. There are a number of companies that are doing lots of innovative and interesting things, but the reason again that I cited Jackson was because not only are they sitting back and setting hard targets to say we want to reduce water usage by X%, we are going to bring landfill waste down to X amount. We're going to reduce greenhouse gases, by X amount of renewable energy, X amount of, the energy that we use will come from renewable sources, et cetera. Not only are they doing that, which I think is important, but then, more importantly, they're taking those targets and tying them into the targets, the key performance. What do you call it? Key performance targets for top management. So it's really about making sure that there's accountability for achieving those things.
When you're working in an industry like wine, which is sort of so susceptible to climate, and then you have the sort of the data coming out of the IPCC and all this kind of stuff, and you see that we're going towards overshoot with the carbon budgets. How does that feature into your sort of forward thinking? Do you have contingencies, or do you think that, we will get there, or what's your sort of?
Yeah, I'm not really sure how to answer that. I think we take the steps that we can take is all, and I think that there's certainly a lot of work to be done.
Yes.
And I think that making everyone aware. There's no step that any one individual is going to take that's going to turn this around, and it's not up to one link in the value chain to do it. I think we need to kind of continue to hammer at this. We need efforts all across the value chain, and it's not going to be one thing. It's going to be the aggregate of a wide range of small actions that are going to start to turn the needle on this. But it's a huge challenge for sure.
And out of a conference like this, what's your sort of takeaway in terms of the value?
You know what, I think it's to me the value is exchanging ideas. To me, it's raising the profile of how important this is to the wine industry, getting the conversation going and bringing it kind of to the front of consciousness for everyone. To me, this, I find value in this, right? I find an enormous amount of value because it forces me to step back and think about, this in strategic ways that I've never thought of before. So I find an enormous amount of value in it.
Just last question. There's a sort of flip side to this. The more we get into taking action on climate change, there are benefits to business. If we can turn it around and really get it. Do you share that sort of optimism in the direction?
Absolutely. We always say that sustainability makes sense, right? And
absolutely.
ENTS, right? It's one of those things where if you look at this just from a pragmatic standpoint, reducing your fossil fuel costs, what's not to like about that, right? And especially at a time when fossil fuel costs are extremely volatile, if you can, the shift over to some of these, making these investments for the long term to reduce your costs, if nothing else, switching to solar and so forth. These are upfront investments, but they can yield results over the long term that make financial sense.
And have you found those easy conversations to have? Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean it's certainly in California. A lot of the wineries that we deal with, there are an awful lot that are that have made a switch, that are investing in solar and wind energy, depending on where you are. We were just, I was just back in January talking with a company, one of our clients that's made a significant investment into wind energy, kind of where they are in California. They get so much wind that it can create a challenge for solar panels because they get covered in dust, but it creates a great opportunity for wind power. And then, it's okay, converting to wind, and then how much do we want to invest in the batteries and so forth. I mean, there's lots of conversations on the back of that, but I think companies get it, and if nothing else, even if you're cynical about climate change, you can certainly recognize that the consumer is moving that way.
Yes.
The consumer is moving that way. This is becoming an important issue, an important consideration for consumer choice. It's driving consumer demand, and I think that's if you want to be a consumer-centric company, that's important.
And someone like Jackson, for example, listening to the talk yesterday, and also with Torres, making these part of their brand story seems to be really obvious move. I mean, is that?
Yeah, and I think for those consumers, it's interesting. For those consumers that are interested in this, they can certainly find that story. But I would say, as from the outside as a consumer, it's not like you get bashed over the head with these stories, and that's what these brands are all about. It's almost like these, especially in the case of Jackson Family Brands, these are great brands on their own, right? I mean, these are brands that have stood out, that have been built on the back of great branding, but when you dig into the story, you realize, wow, there's a great story behind it as well.